In this video we're going to look at the first of the challenges from section 2 of the Introduction to Programming in Blockly. It's entitled Next Olympics. So in this challenge we are asked to write a program which asks for the year of the previous Summer Olympics and then prints out a year of the next Olympics, which basically means it's adding 4 to that number. So we have learnt by this stage how to ask a question where we receive a number in return. So in this first example here, 2016, and we are then asked to tell us what the next Olympics year will be, which is adding 4 to that. So we would expect the next year to be 2016 plus 4, which will give us 2020, as can be seen here. So this is building on knowledge from earlier, where we can ask a question, get an answer from the user that is stored into a variable, and then we'll be able to add something to that variable, in this case doing some maths, and then again using some skills we've already learned, be able to print some text that doesn't change along with some text that is being stored from our variable. And we can see there are 3 examples here that we should test, 2 which kind of make sense and the other one's a little bit weird, but it's still showing that we go by 4 even if the year that we entered was incorrect. So there was not an Olympics in 2011, but still the computer will tell us 4 years later because that's what it will know how to do. So let's make sure that we go ahead and do this. So we're going to start with a variable again because we're going to need to have one to store the year that the user types in. Let's call this one, and I'll just see if I can bring that down. No, I can't, so it's just off my screen, but it's just creating the new variable, and we'll call this one original year. Okay, you can't have spaces or anything in your variable names. If you'd like to indicate a space, I suggest you do that with the underscore character like this. So we now have an original year variable, and I'm going to use the set value, of course, so I'm going to set the value of original year to be whatever they type in. My input is going to be this blue one. What we have learned in the previous steps up here is that a blue ask is going to ask for something that is going to give you a number back. So we saw earlier the green ask, I think it was, the blue ask returns a value which is a number. In programming, in this case, we're going to call that an integer. It's a whole number. It doesn't have a decimal component, although in this case it could, but we can see all our examples are going to be just whole numbers. The string of our question, so the prompt itself, again, I'm going to copy it from the example to make sure I get all of my punctuation, my capitals, etc. all correct, making sure there's no space at the end. Remember, the asks in Blockly will add this space automatically for you between the question and where the user enters in their response, so we don't need to include one at the end. And again, if we were to run this now, we will see that it asks the question and there is the space that it provides, and we can type in our first response, such as 2016 from the first example. We could press enter. We don't get an error, but of course our program doesn't work, or at least it doesn't work completely. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to take our value that we've just stored, so original year, and we're going to add 4 to it. So again, I'm going to do that by 2 ways to show you. The first one I'm going to do is using this built-in function here called increase, and we can increase the value of a variable. So this works because, of course, inside that variable is a number. So we can increase the number inside this variable that we're using by a value that we can set here. So we can say by 4. Okay, so what it basically does is say keep the value in there but increase it by 4, so that now got the same number, 4 numbers bigger. And we can then output that result. So the first part of our output again is going to be static text that doesn't change. So let's copy that from our example, because that's text that's not going to change at all. And the second part of our print statement is going to be the value inside this original year. So I can just take the value of original year and put it there. If I run this now and I try it with my first example, 2016, I should see the output that I expect, such as in the example here. If I run it again, and I try the second example, 2020, press enter. Of course, I get the same as that second example there, and one more time where I do 2011, and although it wasn't a correct Olympics year, I do get the mathematically correct as far as our program is concerned. So this should mark successfully. So we'll submit that and we'll see if we are correct, and there we go, it does. Now I'd like to just quickly demonstrate one other way that you might go about this program, because we don't always have this increase option available, and notice of course increase also has a decrease option if you're trying to go smaller. So another option, I'm just going to put this down here for a minute and get rid of this increase by 4. Another option which might be more programmatically correct for later on is to change the value of the variable and save it in a new value. So I'm going to create a new variable. So I'm going to create next year, and that's what I'm going to set this new one to. So we're going to set a new value called next year to be the value of original year plus, we'll get a number, plus 4. And then we'll keep our print statement, and instead of original year here, we're going to print out the next year value. Now the reason you might do this as opposed to what looks a bit simpler, which is increasing the number, is you might need to keep the original year and have the new year. So for example, there might be a question where you have to output both the original year and the new year. So by just using the increase option, you're getting rid of the original piece of information and you wouldn't be able to use it again. So sometimes it's worth creating a new variable and do your math and saving it there so you can have access to both pieces of information. In both cases, if we run it, so again if we run this one now and do 2016, you'll see we still get the same result. It's still basically the same size program essentially, but we now have access to both pieces of information, and that will be important in some later challenges. So if I try marking this again, you will see that again it does work. So there we go. We are first of all asking a question where we expect to get a numerical answer. That's why we're using the blue ask, and we're saving it into a variable. And we're either using the variable increase option, or we're creating a new variable and adding 4 to it and saving it. And then either way, we are printing out again some static text, so text that doesn't change, along with the value that we have calculated for the next Olympics year. And we've seen that now in 2 different ways.